I very much so appreciate being here. So today I'm definitely going to talk to you about the different skills and activities that can help you advance your career or go after your goals and achieve them. No matter what those goals are, it does not always have to be advancement. There's many other things that we may want to do in our career. So I'm going to talk about that today, and I'm going to give you lots of tactical tips and tricks to help you so that when you get off of this call, you will immediately have actionable things in which you could take with you and start incorporating into your career. So I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
We can see like half of it. It's showing a little bit.
Oh, there we go. Okay. It was asking something and it threw me off the thinking. I really had to pause and think there for a moment. Okay. So as Susie says, you know, I worked in tech for a very long time, essentially. I worked at big companies like Google. I moved up the ladder, and I will tell you this, I am probably, like many of you, are very good at my job. I was great at my job. I knew what I was doing. I could figure it out. I was able to see things that other people weren't able to see. But what was really challenging for me was really understanding how to be strategic and thoughtful about my career. The work I could do, but the career part and really figuring that out was challenging. And I have to tell you that for all executives, it's challenging. Like, we're all figuring it out through trial and error. There's nobody that has this perfectly figured out. I have my dog behind me. I have my whole family like right in the background. So people are just going to start like popping out of the woodwork, but just ignore them. I'll try to. Okay. So we're all figuring it out through trial and error. So truly, like I was just on another talk and Sally Krawcheck was speaking, and she is somebody who I admire. She's the CEO of Ellevest, and she's another executive. And I know that she too has been figuring out her career through trial and error. And so truly it's all of us. And so a lot of that imposter syndrome hits us, or we think we should know these things or know the exact playbook to advance our career, and we just don't. And the reason why is it has historically not been taught, and it hasn't been taught really until we started teaching it. So this is, you know, and our a view of what I felt like throughout my career, of like many ups and downs. This big squiggle is when I had my son, and I just was not sure of how I was supposed to advance and really like figure out my career and invest in my career at the exact same time that I wanted to quit and just stay home with my son. I wanted to cleave myself into two and do like everything work and everything kid, and I did not know how to merge the two together, and it took me quite some time to figure it out, which by the way also happens. Sometimes time is a great healer. So after I left Google and I ran Americas at another ad tech company and sales and account management. And when I left there, it was a few months after I had left, the Me Too movement started. And I typed Me Too into Facebook. And the very next day, so it's 3 years ago, I decided to create the Forem to create more diverse organizations. So my goal is to move 1 million underrepresented minorities and women up into leadership roles by 2030. And the first thing I did when I created my company was to figure out what are the skills to advancement. Because if it was just the work, like if you think you can get by and continue to advance just on the work, it does not work that way. And you would actually see companies be more diverse if it was just about the work, because men and women enter the workforce at the same rate. So there are obviously lots of other things that are going on. And one of the things that I had figured out is that there are only and always 5 skills that we need to advance our career. And truly, it doesn't matter who you are, if you're a man or a woman, if you're a person of color, if you are transgendered, like truly, these are the same skills. And so what I'm going to do today is talk to you about these skills, and we're going to dive a little bit more into one of them. And it's so important that we don't wait. So we all know that there's a big issue at the top. There's more CEOs named John than there are female CEOs. But actually, the challenge starts often before we even feel it. So 30% of more white men are promoted than white women at the very first step up to manager. And we really don't feel it at that point in time. But each subsequent step, it becomes more and more obvious until it's like this giant siren call for change. So what we do is that we focus earlier on in a career to move people up into leadership instead of supporting people who've already figured it out and can do this. So the promised 5 skills. The first skill is self-advocacy. This is the one that I'm going to dive into in a little bit more detail in a bit. The second that we teach is personal branding. The way that we think about a personal brand is that it's really the motor. You could think about it as the engine to your entire career. So we teach personal branding by just telling you to simply identify what are your strengths and what are you passionate about? What do you want to do more of? Think about the work that you get. You know, when you get a project and you're so excited about it, you like run back to your desk and you end up working on it all night, or you want to like cancel other meetings or not attend them because you're just so focused on something that you're psyched about. So what is that? Like really identify that, figure out what in that, what is like the makeup of that moment that creates that energy for you, and talk about it with other people. Talk about it with your manager, talk about it with your peers. When you introduce yourself, say, this is what I do and I love this part of my job. I'm so excited about it because. And then what happens is you get more and more work that's based on those things, that's based on your passions and your strengths. And when you have more work that's based on your passions and strengths, you do better work. And in tech, when there's constant change, this is actually this will help direct your career in the direction you want it to go. So instead of being like a passive, like participant of your career, instead drive your career forward by telling people exactly the type of work that you will knock out of the park every single time. And that you'll probably work even harder on because you're so excited about it. And you will absolutely get more work that's based on those things. Okay, third skill is relationships. So when we teach relationships, it falls under 2 categories. The first is your network. And I know this can feel dreaded sometimes. Sometimes with the, networking can really feel like work, or if you're an introvert, it can feel like something you absolutely don't want to do. And I get that. I understand that. I'm not advocating for you to go, you don't have to go to cocktail parties. You don't have to do this stuff that makes you uncomfortable. But what you absolutely have to do is to connect with people one-to-one. So really my hard recommendation is to spend half an hour with a different person every single week. And again, just one-to-one. Set up time with someone and ask them how you can help them. So tap into your curiosity, tap into generosity, and ask them how you could help them. And the reason why networking is so important is because 85% of all of your opportunities will come from the people you know. So if you want that choice project, if you want more opportunities, you actually just have to invest in human beings, because these are the people that hold the keys to these projects, or to the next reorg, or to the next opportunity or department that's being developed. And you could be the best at your job, and some Joe Schmo is going to get that awesome project, and he's probably going to get it before you've ever found out about it. And you'll just find out because it's been announced. And when that happens, and it's so frustrating to you because you're like, I could have done that, or I would have loved that, it's because that person is better networked. And that's where the career opportunities come in. But here's the thing about networking, and I want to be really clear about this. I'm asking you to form real, authentic relationships, not transactional ones. So I want this to be something where you're able to build new opportunities for yourself over time. It does not happen right away. Just get to know people, and over time, more opportunities and knowledge will come to your insights into new things that are happening across your organization or your industry. And it also feeds the soul, because you're actually connecting authentically with other people. And that's why we say, come at this with generosity. So always ask people when you set up networking, how can I help you? What's going on with you in your career? Okay, there's another piece under relationships, which is stakeholders. So when I'm asking you to network too, I think about that as like your level and maybe a little bit above, a little below. I'm not talking about that executive because I really don't believe that's networking. I mean, it's a form of networking, but really I think about this, I bucket it in a different place. And for me, these are career stakeholders. So these are people who hold sway and influence over your career. And they're people that you may need to know, whether you like them or not, like doesn't matter. Maybe they're a department head, or maybe they, are a gatekeeper at a company that you want to work at. So these are the people that you want to connect with and you need to connect with. The way I believe you should connect with them is to find something that, first of all, you need to identify who are these people. The other piece is you need to understand what is important to them, which should not be, it's pretty obvious. Like if they're in sales, they're growing the business. If they're in marketing, they're marketing. Like, it's like you could take some pretty big assumptions there. And then if you have an insight that could help them grow their business, that could help them with new relationships, that if you have an insight on how the business can be running more effectively, efficiently, so that they could save money, share that with them. Tell them, this is an idea that I have that could help save you $2 million if you scaled this across your department. And they will take that meeting. But for the people that work within companies too, like corporations, if you're bigger, if you're at a company with like 50 plus people, it's really important to note who are the people who hold sway over your career. So most of us think about our manager. And our manager can do one thing for us, and that's actually putting us up for promotion. But there's a group of people who actually have to approve it. And so we need to make sure your work and impact is visible to those stakeholders. And that's really where you want to give them an idea or something that could help them grow their business. And I'll take questions in a little bit on these. There's always some questions on the nuances of these. The fourth skill is financial fluency. So you could be the best at your job, number one, but it will be very hard to become a department head unless you can express the economics of the business. So you really don't want to pick up this skill when it's too late. You want to pick it up earlier in your career and really just start refining it and working on it. So for all the people who are working within companies, like go set up time with someone in your finance department. Every time there's an earnings call for you or your clients or competitors, like absolutely, that's what you should be listening to. And that's how you really start developing this language. And finally, it's about leading from where you are and really presenting as a leader. So the fact of the matter is how people perceive us and how we communicate, decisions are still made by human beings. And so really communicating in a way that creates confidence is important. And I've always been a pretty good presenter. I've never been afraid of presenting until a certain point in my career. As I started moving up the ladder, there was a moment where I had so much pressure on myself. I had massive stage fright. Like I couldn't even introduce myself in a team meeting. I had so much anxiety around it. When everyone would go around the table and have to say their name. And this is like my team. And I was just like, I don't know what's going on with me, but there was an enormous amount of imposter syndrome and anxiety. And so what I started doing is I realized I have to figure this out. And so I really just started practicing and practicing. And I created a keynote that I would practice in very small groups, 1-to-1, and 3 people, then 5 on Zoom calls until I was like up on a stage. So there's ways that you could do this and just like step change that, the way in which you're communicating. But I do think it is something you don't have to shy away from if it is something that you feel like is an area of potential improvement for you. And just go work with a colleague on it, or, there are career coach, presentation coaches, like we have a bunch in the forum, and there's other places or, resources that could help you here as well. Okay, I'm sort of wondering if I should take questions right now or go into self-advocacy. What do you think, Susie?
I don't think it would be a bad idea to take a few questions now if people have it on this particular slide, because they're going to expand more on self-advocacy. Yeah. So if anyone has questions, so someone said personal branding. Are you asking a question about how how do you find your personal brand, how to do it without looking pushy or looking foolish. So instead of like looking like an influencer, how do you do it authentically? How do you build that brand in an authentic way?
Be authentic. Truly. Like your personal brand isn't something that you want to be, it's something that you are. And so you want to use, that's why I always define personal brand as identifying what are you good at, what do you want to do more of? And tell people about the stuff you're good at or the stuff that excites you. You know, like I love doing this because, or like these types of projects are so exciting because of X, Y, and Z, or they really tap into, you know, like this past experience that I have that I love doing. And it's like a real strength of mine. And that way it's not like this, that you don't want it to be this thing that's BS. You don't want it to be surface. This is work. And we're human beings. We don't need a mission statement. You know, you're not influencers. And even if you are thought leaders, it needs to be thought, you know, you want to present yourself as a thought leader in the stuff that you care about. It's so important. And even if that stuff is a little bit unrelated or very unrelated to what you do today, if you're passionate about something, talk about it. It draws people in. And if it's quirky and weird, most of the time that's even better because then it gets more people talking and just interested in you.
Yeah, that's great. I love that quirky and weird thing because it is interesting how sometimes those little things can actually form a connection with somebody that you would never have thought you could have had a good connection with. Is by bringing those things up that you are passionate about.
Yeah.
So someone had a question about how, you know, coders tend to be a lot of coders are quiet and consider themselves not non-leaders. So what would be your advice to someone like that? Is it worth it for them to aim to be a leader if they're uncomfortable in that? Like, how can they, what can they do to lead in a way that is sincere to them and to their personality?
So I do think so much of this is truly about being authentic. And I'll tell you this, like there were many moments in my career where I didn't want to lead and I didn't lead. Like I was an IC for a very long time. I loved being an IC. It was like the best job ever, by the way. I was a sales IC. It was the best. So I don't think you have to have this pressure to lead. What I would say to you is I would like to apply a little pressure in terms of stretching yourself to try new things, even if it's in a safe zone. So a lot of times, and even my talk is about career advancement, like that's the title. It's kind of a catchy title. The truth is I just don't believe in the ladder. And actually, I think the ladder, like the ladder only up is really limiting in many ways. And if you want to be a leader one day, but you're not sure of how to do it today, just amass a lot of experiences and continue to connect with other people, with humans, in terms of, you know, building those relationships. And that's the stuff that will actually create opportunities for you, that when you are ready and when there is something that you feel like is the perfect fit, you'll be ready to go for it. And you'll know about it before other people, because you're just, you know, you're sort of putting yourself out there. And you can even put yourself out there to say, I may not be ready for this today, but it is something that I have an eye on in the future.
Yeah, I think that's great. The whole idea about the lateral, like you can make lateral moves, and those are very important in your career because they show that you can, you know, you've now amassed all these different skills that will bring you to a different place when you do want to move up.
Yes. And, you know, it's really that experimentation. It's the experimentation that will make you so strong at your core job at the end, like whatever you decide you want to be more of your core job. Although I don't even believe that either. Like for now, you know, this is what I do and I love it, but I still have an eye to like, well, what's my next thing that I'm going to do? What's my next way of giving back and supporting, you know, I think it'll probably be founders or something. But the point is, you really do want to experiment and bring that, like all these different, you know, different ways of working and working with different people and work streams and processes into what you're doing. As you know, it's all very additive. And for Eng, it's so interesting too, because you could be an IC for so long and do very well. So I would say you could absolutely lead from where you are without managing. You could also absolutely be a thought leader in your space and maybe put yourself out there a bit more, maybe raise your hand for panels or something, or talks, or write articles, or, get on Twitter or something and just share on occasion the stuff that is interesting to you or what you're learning along the way. And that actually goes it's really important to do that. And I think about that in this bucket of like leading greatly and leading from where you are.
Yeah, I think that's great. And something for people to be aware of who want to kind of maybe start honing some of those skills is, Women Who Code Boston has lightning talks, 10 minutes, so it's a great way to kind of share. I think maybe one of the leaders can put a link in the chat that you can fill out a form, say, here's something I'd like to talk about, do a 10-minute presentation in kind of a really low key, really kind of comfortable environment. So if you want to do something like that, that's a really good way to start, honing some of those skills that you feel like maybe you don't currently have.
Yes.
So someone had a great question about how do you handle when people have already formed opinions about you before they even know you? So maybe based on, how you look or your name or something like that, if they've formed opinions, how do you handle that?
I think you need to tell them what they need to think about you. And this goes again back to your strengths and passions. Like so oftentimes we get boxed in, especially women, we're like viewed as like the work that we're doing right now, or like to your point, there could be external things that people are judging us on. So I really think we need to be clearer on why we're here, or like what we're doing that is special or different or impactful, or is, again, just goes back to exciting. So those people that are super passionate too, they draw others in. I actually think about my dog, who's just like playing in the background before. Every time I walk in the house, I could be gone for 1 minute and my dog is greeting me as if he's never seen me before. And I always think of this like, my God, he's so passionate. This is amazing. Like, we should all be like that level of enthusiasm for each other and for life, because this is why people love dogs. It draws you in. Passion and excitement draws people in. That's obviously an extreme example. But if you can just share, if you could build the courage to just share with people the stuff that or, I'm here because, or this is the work that I do and I love it because, all those people who are sort of doubting you, or you think they're doubting you, you don't actually know if they are, you really do draw them in and make them really curious about you and your background. People just see what you give them, so just give them a little bit more and be clear about it.
So we have a couple of questions that are kind of similar in that, how do you identify those key leaders? Outside of just titles, how do you know who has sway and who has influence over your career if you're in a bigger organization?
Okay, there's a whole process in how big companies work, and it's almost always the same, where there's a group of people in your department that are like the arbitrators of who gets promoted. It's typically your manager and your manager's peers all sit in a room, and for like that department, they have to say, well, who's going to get that one promotion, or who's going to get like the 2 best performance review scores. And if all of those people sitting in the room, your manager and their peers, don't agree, or if your manager is like, you're amazing, but the other people are like, well, we don't even know her, we haven't seen her work, I too have someone I want to get promoted, I also have, like, and everyone has someone, then it's it's very hard to get it. What will happen is your promotion will get kicked back down to you, and you're going to have to get some sort of visibility project so that all those other people in the room actually know your work. And I hate when it like sucks, that process, because then what this means is that you're probably, and I only say you because a lot of women and underrepresented minorities take a little bit more time to raise their hand for that promotion. And then if their work is invisible and it gets kicked back down again, this is like a 2-year or 3-year potential delay in getting to where you believe you should go. Plus it's more work. So identifying those people is so important. If you don't know who they are, ask your manager, and do not feel nervous about asking your manager. Everybody deserves to understand who is sits in that room. In big tech companies, it's typically called something like calibration. Who sits in calibration manager? And if your manager is like, I don't know if I tell you, go ask HR. Everybody should know this. It should be common language and knowledge within organizations. And you have every right to know. It's not something that's ever intentionally hidden, but I think managers don't really understand why nobody knows. And so maybe they feel sometimes nervous about talking about it outwardly, but they should be able to answer a very direct question.
Okay, we'll have one more question now, and then we'll take some more at the end. But some people put some great comments about, leading. Like leading can be on a micro level. Like you don't. It doesn't have to be some huge grand gesture, right? You start small. You should always start small and get more comfortable and take those little steps, because that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And somebody else said, the kind of the concept of a leader of one. You're leading your authentic, purpose-filled life, right? So that follows well into the idea that each of us have the ability to discern and design our life. It doesn't have to be somebody else's. Like you said, the career path is not just a ladder straight up. It's what do you want to do and how do you want to do it? And I think that's the most important thing. So I think we had some really good comments on that. Yeah. So one more question, then we'll jump into something else. Is somebody asked, how do we make sure that we're growing and that we're not being sabotaged by peers that are competitive? I know in some bigger companies that's an issue, because you feel like it's that idea that, like you said, there's one promotion and there's all these people. So how do you make sure that somebody's not sabotaging you or doing something that's making your career not move the way it should?
I don't know. I don't know why I haven't had that question before. Not in that way. Politics at companies suck. I agree. Sabotage is terrible. Here's the thing. I just think it goes back to like your career. And if you're working at a company where people you actively know people around you are sabotaging, and it is like, that to me, there's always some indication in some of these questions or talks. Sometimes I'm like, oh no, it sounds like not a great culture. So, and then you have to decide, is this the team? Is it like an individual? Is it a team or a company-wide issue? And I think based on that, like you then have to make decisions. If it's one individual, I would talk to that individual. I would literally talk to them and find out what's going on and actually figure out if you guys can align. Because alliances are much stronger for both of you than going together. Going like separate and competing. If it's a team, then I think there's, especially these big companies, lots of opportunities on other teams where there's like very healthy organizations, healthy managers, healthy teams. And if it's the entire company that's truly unhealthy, which does happen at times, I don't know, like maybe assess that company. There's lots of great companies that are out there with very healthy culture. And the thing about healthy culture and healthy managers is that when they see you and they understand your value, they're going to help you rise and help you fulfill your potential. And that's really what you want. So if there's like this active sabotage thing, that's not good. You don't want that.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we'll move on, and then we'll definitely take more questions at the end. So you can be putting things in the chat as we go along.
Okay.
But this has been awesome. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to dive into self-advocacy now, and I'll spend a little bit more time here. So with self-advocacy, well, I actually forgot the slide was in here, but yeah, very important, because there's not a damn soul in the whole wide world that cares about your career more than you. Like that's why this is so important. And yet we often give this power to other people, where we expect other people to advocate for us. And we get pissed and upset and feel like unseen and unheard when they don't. And also, we don't always arm them. We just expect them to see magically all the great work that we're doing, that they should be advocating for us, because we're like working so hard, working our chops off, working late at night, sending a gajillion emails, like, projects are happening. But if we're so focused on the job, it's very hard for people to see what we're doing. And if you think about all of us right now, like we're in the crazy time, we're in a global pandemic that we're all sitting under. And so cognitively, like we're not at our best. And so we just can't expect other people to actually see our work. We have to share it with them. So do not give up control of this. You want to help people advocate for you. You should not expect them to do it because you're doing great work. It's really, you need to still own that process. So typically when people teach about self-advocacy, it's about the big ask. Like, what are you self-advocating for? Is it a promotion? Is it a raise? Is it that great project? Is it where are you landing in the reorg? But the issue with the big ask is, and this goes back to the promotion thing I was talking about before, if your work is not seen on an ongoing basis, if it's not visible, then when you have your big ask, you're not going to get it. It's going to go to some Joe Schmo who's maybe doing an okay job, like not terrible, like pretty good job, but like is way more visible than you. That's who's going to get it. And it goes back to who's sitting in that room and do they know your work? And if it's just your manager, it's not enough. And it will never be enough, by the way. I like do this as a founder with my investors. I have a whole like visibility thing. I have to make sure our work is visible to them. So what's more important than the big ask? It's really making sure your work is visible. And I talk about this as always on. So the big ask, by the way, that's like every few years you want a promotion. Always on, this is like every 2 to 3 weeks, making sure your work is visible. So let's talk about how do we actually get this done and get tactical. So one, you yourself need to acknowledge your achievements. What is the work that you're doing that you're most proud of? I don't even remember what I had for lunch today, let alone, a great project I worked on 4 months ago. So this stuff has to be documented. And it actually needs to be shared on an ongoing basis. Let me ask you this. Who has gone to, like in your performance review, when you're writing your self-assessment, who has had to go into their calendar or emails to find their own work that they've done? Oops, me too. So what that means is we literally don't even remember our own work. And yet we're like, oh, why doesn't sorry, I'm on the wrong side. Why doesn't my manager remember my great work? Why doesn't someone else remember my work? Like we don't even remember our own work. And then we get so upset when we feel not seen. So it's really an unrealistic expectation. So step one, acknowledge your own achievements. So what I would like for you to do is to think about a time when you were really proud about a project you worked on. I would actually jot down, and I would write this down. We're not going to spend, just write down the exercise, which is think about a time when. Maybe choose 3 to 5 projects that you are proud of over the past, since we're at the end of year, why not the full year? And then maybe you could set up time with your manager to talk about the things you're most proud of over 2020, especially like what a disaster of a year. Like, I hope you feel proud. Just getting by, feels pretty good. So think about that and really frame it in terms of proud. I keep using this word proud. It's very important because no one can take pride away from you. Ever. That's you. That's your emotion. And again, when you talk about pride and I'm proud of something, people's faces light up. On Zoom, you could see it in their eyes twinkling. And so it draws people in. It's very authentic and real, opposed to that boasty, like these are my amazing projects that I worked on this year. Like, this is the great work I did. This is the work I'm most proud of. And I wanted to share it with you because it's important. I'm excited about it, right? It taps into that passion again. The second step, if you want to elevate it, I don't think you need this for all of them. This is where it gets a little bit more formalized, but you could outline this in a 3-part way. What was the problem? Which, by the way, keep it short. Let me tell you something. Nobody wants to hear the long story about the problem. Like, nobody wants to know how the sausage is made. Just what was the problem? Keep it a sentence, like 5 words. Keep it short. Whoops. What was your unique contribution? Many of us work in teams. What was your part? And what was the business impact? you must put in the business impact. I actually barely care about the other stuff. I most care about the business impact, because they will take this away from you unless you tell them what the business impact is. And by the way, business impact is a lens in which you should be thinking about your work. The projects you take on, is there an impact? If you don't know what that impact is, and by the way, I do lots of workshops on impact because a lot of us don't know what that impact is. So if we don't know the impact, like how is someone else going to know that? How are they supposed to advocate for you and talk about your great, like what you're doing? So impact is not always easy to figure out. We may not know right away, but what are some milestones? What do we presume is going to happen? Why are we working on this? Then later on, you could figure out like, did our thesis actually pan out? But like, if you're working on a project, it's like, I think it's going to generate $10 million. Or I think I'm going to, this operational efficiency can get the entire department doing X, Y, and Z. So really start articulating that. I head up an ERG. And actually what we believe is that everyone that's going through our ERG, all, 500 members are operating at a higher level, or we're able to have high, and we have higher productivity, which can equate to X, Y, and Z, which you're Googling. It's just like standard numbers. Or like I work as part of an ERG, and we believe that we improve retention of, critical members of this organization, which are very hard to replace and are very expensive to replace. On average, that replacement costs X, Y, and Z. So because of that, I believe this work is a $10 million project. So that's the stuff that and you could say that, just say on average, this back of the napkin math, this is what, it does not have to be perfect, but you have to have a thesis and assumptions, and that's what you should be sharing. And finally, it's got to be habit building. If you just do this like tomorrow and not carry through, it doesn't work for you or for the people around you. Because again, just no one's going to remember. We're all too busy. So the thing with the Forem is we do workshops. We have something called a boot camp where we teach not all, but most of these skills in this boot camp. We teach the ones that are most important now that we're behind our computer. So self-advocacy, personal branding, stakeholder alignment, and networking. And then we remind you of everything we've taught. So for instance, if we're telling you, you need to make sure your work is visible, every 2 to 3 weeks, we send a text asking if you have work that you're proud of, and just reply to the text, write it in there. And then every month we will remind you to share it with your manager. Before we were all working from home, it was quarterly. Now it's monthly. We have to have a little bit more of that career rigor for now. But the best thing about having career rigor now is that it's a catalyst that you will, for change, and really it's a forcing function to be strategic about your career. Because guess what? We have all relied on the water cooler or the micro kitchen, or hung outside the bathroom waiting for an executive to walk out so that we could pitch some idea, or just be visible, or ask them how they are. Or I've stayed at happy hour, far too long, just hoping I get 5 minutes with the executive, which by the way, I never even got, and I'm exhausted and annoyed the next day. So those are bad. That is a strategy that doesn't work, but it's the one every single one of us has relied upon forever. So this is a great catalyst to help create actual ways in which to raise your visibility forevermore. So you can use all of this, and should be, for the next 30 years of your career. The other thing is, when we track our accomplishments and our impact, we actually start seeing the trends. What is our impact? What is happening here? What is the great work I'm doing? And also, maybe we're working on stuff that doesn't have as big an impact as it can. Maybe we're getting saddled with more office housework, party planning, stuff like that. Give that to some other guy, literally give it to a guy. I love giving that stuff to men. Just fills me with great pleasure. So all of this, keeping a habit, I would love for you guys to use the Forem, but if you don't, get a Google Doc, put it in your account, figure out some way, but make it happen. So here's the thing. I threw a lot at you, and unfortunately 70% of everything that I said will be forgotten a hot minute from now. It's called the forgetting curve. And it's one of the big reasons we built all of these nudges, because we know we have good intent. Like, you guys got it. It's like in here, and then tomorrow it'll be gone. So that's why we don't just do workshops, and we don't just have text and nudges. And we don't just have a community. We bring all of these things together, because this is truly what helps like bring what we're teaching to life, so that you could then start utilizing it on a day-to-day basis in a way that's simple and easy and not time consuming or a major drag. Oh, and I actually literally forgot about this. My daughter's fell on the stairs. She's okay, but made me forget for a moment. So our next boot camp is coming up in January. It's called Level Up, and we're offering $100 off for you guys here to participate. And so Susie has the link, which we could put in the chat, and then also we'll put it in the email after as a follow-up. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. Do you guys have more comments, questions?
Thanks, Alli. That was really great. There is one question somebody put in the chat. She was asking if business impact reaches out to the competitor markets as well, when you're trying to determine what your business impact is.
So what do you mean? What does that mean? Sorry, can you?
Kathleen, could you just add a little more detail to that? Are you asking, like, when you're trying to determine your business impact, do you consider how you're affecting your competitors as well? I can unmute you too if you want to talk. How has your work made your business more competitive?
Yes, definitely. That could be business impact. However, I want you to always take it a step further when you can, which is 99% of the time, by the way, to either making money or saving money, because that's what your CEO cares about. And you really want to start talking the language of your executive team. And so that's why if your company is more competitive, great. What does that mean? Are you going to drive, like, eventually will this drive more, will these insights that you're creating help arm some other team so that the thing that they build will then, drive more revenue? Like, you don't have to be the person that's doing the thing that's driving the revenue, but if there's an assist there and you believe that assist is going to do something, know what that something is.
So someone asked if you could repeat what you said about calibration before. That was, I think, earlier.
Oh, yes. I was just looking in that. Okay.
Yeah.
So not all, but a lot of big tech companies call, it's during a review process when the managers get together and they have to determine who is getting a promotion and who is getting the top perf scores, or all perf scores. They have to approve all of them. That is often called calibration. It's called different things at different companies, but and that's where they literally have to go through every single person on the team and say, and the managers will say, okay, I want Shayna to get promoted, but then again, another manager will say, well, I want Rebecca to be promoted, and I want Tom, and some other guy will be like, I want Tom to be promoted. And so then they have to figure out, well, out of all of these people who rightfully deserve a promotion, very likely, who's going to get it? And again, when you think about your manager cannot like fight to the death for you to get promoted. They're not going to give up their relationships with their peers. So they will acquiesce and say, okay, like if nobody knows your work, it's just very hard for them to state that case. So that's why you don't want to just leave it up to your manager. And it will also help you understand, like, if you know who sits in that room, again, ask. First of all, look on your org chart. Who are your manager's peers? That's probably who's sitting there, and ask. And then identify them to say, well, do these people know my work? And that's one of the things we have in the forum. So we teach this, and then we also have a stakeholder analysis where you literally write down people's names, and then you say, do they have a high, medium, or low level of influence? If they sit in that room, they have a very high level of influence because they literally green or red light, your promotion, your perf scores. And then you want to outline, do they know your work? Do they know your name even? Maybe you're new, maybe they could work in some other fields entirely, but they're still sitting in that calibration. So you think they don't have a big impact. Why would they? But they do, because they sit in that room. So you have to understand that, and then outline, do they have high, medium, low level of, how well do they know you? And if all of those people, if they don't know your work, very likely you're not going to get the promotion, which is okay, because now you know. So now you have to figure out, well, how are you going to get these people to become your advocate? And that's when I would literally go through the past 2-3 years of your work, some projects you've been working on, to say, well, what do I have? What am I sitting on that could help somebody else? What insight do I have that I maybe executed with my client or with my project or my team that actually, if it was adopted across like these 3 other teams, like it could be so much bigger. And I'm going to now go share this little insight with these other people.
So that's great. And also arming your own manager with information about yourself. If they have information that they can then kind of give a reason to the other people why you should be the person, that also I think helps as well. So someone had a question about the you mentioned financial fluency before.
Yes.
So what resources do you suggest to learn more about that financial fluency?
Yeah, so we teach this in a master class. We just finished. It was like a 5-part series. But I also suggest always listening to the earnings. Oh, and we also do so the master class, there's a fee. We do a free earnings statement 101 every single quarter. But other than that, I would always listen to the earnings statements. My recommendation is to get a group of people to do it. And by the way, most of you are not gonna know what's in there because like it is complicated and hard and you're all starting out like together. So know that, like, don't be embarrassed by it. Just say like, this is weird. It's another language. Let's figure it out. And I would literally write down all the terms you don't understand together and then work together to figure them out. Also, set up time with somebody in finance at your company. How about they listen to the earnings statement with you, or you take your questions to them? And by the way, these guys don't get out much, right? It's a very internal role. Also, they don't have access to a lot of people in product and eng and UX. And so it's very helpful for them to get to know you, just like it's helpful for you to get to know them. So it also can count as networking, right? Like that's one of the reasons you can network. And I would even suggest literally saying to yourself, okay, I'm going to network with one person from each department at my company and really like get to know your company better and how it functions. And that can also help you understand like, how healthy is my department, or how are other departments run, or what ideas do they have that I could then take to mind. Like I was really coming from sales blown away that like at many companies, you could be a very high level, but still in IC and engineering. And I was like, oh my God, if I only knew that when I had my young kids, like I would have used that to say the precedent has been set in engineering. We should do this in sales. Instead, you get to a certain level, you have to become a manager or like you just get capped. And so if I only knew that then, I would have tried to leverage the hell out of that. And that's the stuff that you want to be able to do too. So if other teams or people are doing things that you think are cool or really interesting or beneficial and can be adopted for you or your department, like do that. It's a great source of information and insight and inspiration.
Okay, we're just about 7:30. I've got a couple more questions. So we have, how can we find the financial or quantifiable evidence to support the impact you're making if you're not in sales or like an easy to quantify position? Like, how do you do that?
So I have to reset what people think about sales because I hear this all the time. When salespeople hit their number, they're just doing their job. That's just a meets expectation. That's like no big deal. It can be super hard, by the way. I'm not saying it's easy, but that's still not a giant accomplishment. That's just doing your job. So even salespeople need to figure out what is the stuff that they're really proud of, and then how do you quantify it? So I do think it's more of a common question than we may even realize. So one, there's many reasons why something may not be quantifiable. One, it may not be quantifiable, or may not be quantifiable yet. Like maybe you're working on a long-term project. Maybe you're not the owner. Maybe you're working on a piece of the project, right? Like many of us work on a piece and then it gets handed off to other people until this thing launches. So you really want to have a thesis for why you're doing what you're doing and share that thesis. And then over time, you can evaluate, is that thesis correct or not? Like I worked on this project, I did this thing, it's competitive research, 6 other teams used it. And, and like we thought this thing was going to generate all of this revenue and it didn't. But it's the thesis, it's the thought behind it and what you're driving towards that's so important. And by the way, even when things don't work, you really want to be able to surface that too, so that you could then figure out, well, why didn't this work? Let's not do that again. Let's share this so that other people don't do this again either. Like what's going on there? I also think there's a lot more research that we can be doing to figure out what do we think an impact can be? Like what are just some general stats that we say, well, if I apply these general trends to what I'm doing, I believe this project will be, whatever, X, Y, and Z large, or we'll have, we'll save this amount of money. Also, you could ask other departments. So use this as, again, another opportunity to network with people to figure out, well, I worked on this part of the project. Other people are now working on it. Like, what was that impact? What happened to that thing? So get curious, find out, and do the research. It often does take research.
Yeah, that's great. This has really been amazing. Thank you so much, Alli. I really appreciate it. And everyone who's on here, if you're not on Women Who Code Boston Slack, definitely join us, and hopefully join us at the Women Who Connect this week, starting tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.
And I definitely hope to see you guys in the forum too. So get that $100, the $100 discount, and it begins in January for those who work at decent sized companies, even very small ones. There's almost always an L&D budget that you could expense it to. So.
Oh, great. And I'll be sending that out. I did put it in the link here, but I will be sending it out in an email as well.
Awesome. So, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Take care.